If you still can't fall asleep, then welcome to Sound from the Darkness. Night 8. The Strange Crucifixion. A young woman was found stabbed to death in her home. The TV was running another bulletin, and the photographer zoomed in on the body. She was young, and her death was horrific. I couldn't help sighing, poor thing. What's so poor about it? My friend, who had been looking at a Yunnan map behind me, suddenly turned to the scholar's family. Come on, she died too young, and so miserably. I pointed at the TV. It is tragic, but if you're a medical examiner or a cop processing the scene, don't say that, he said meaningfully. I knew he was about to tell another story, so I teased him. What's the big deal? Just a comment. You'll know whether it matters after I tell you. I was staying at a hotel when a murder suddenly happened. I didn't know anything at first, but everyone in the building was called out and a large group of police arrived and sealed it off. Then they questioned everyone one by one. Later, I learned that a guest had actually found a woman's corpse nailed to the floor. When they carried the body out, she looked very young, not decomposed yet. I didn't see clearly. You know how crowded cops get. The proprietor, a woman in her 40s, sat on the floor beside me. Her body, fat like Michelin tires, was so thick I mistook it for a foam mattress. She cried and said it wasn't her business. In truth, whether it was or not, her hotel was closed anyway. I remember a young uniformed officer. It sounds absurd. He had blonde hair, a clean-shaven face, and looked a bit like a Hong Kong movie star. He glanced at the girl's body and said, "How tragic." As soon as he said it, an older cop next to him yanked him aside and started scolding him. I don't recall the exact words. After that, things proceeded normally. Coincidentally, the young cop was the one who took my statement. I told him everything that happened that night, word for word. He wrote it down meticulously like a student still in school. I guessed he must have just started. Otherwise, he wouldn't forget such a simple taboo. When he was about to leave, I offered him a cigarette. He hesitated, but accepted. Since we smoked together, we naturally chatted a bit. New to the job, I probed this bookish lad. Actually, I had just got home and hadn't showered when I got the call. But this case is really so tragic. He still seemed a bit shaken. I saw a cop stop you. What did he say? The young man looked embarrassed, but after a silence he spoke. Obviously, he wasn't lying. He's my boss. He's about my father's age, but always acts like an old man. He has a son about my age, so he always says he'll treat me like his own, he said angrily. He said I was hopeless. He said it on the spot, then told me to go home, light incense, show respect, and take a hot bath. He really overdid it. I just said it was tragic. I looked at him. It seemed he truly didn't know. There are unwritten rules at scenes, especially homicide scenes. Never say things like pitying or avenging the victim. Just do your job. What's your name? I wanted his contact. The Sioux from the land of the rising sun. He showed me his handwriting. I'm with the Criminal Investigation Unit. Here's my number. He casually handed me a slip of paper. I gave him one too. He looked at my card and said in surprise, "You." I knew you were knowledgeable. In fact, I wasn't much older, but I always felt more seasoned. Young people are easy to get along with, though who knows if he'd stay this open a few years later. I couldn't stay at that hotel, so I had to find another. The murder had cast a shadow over the wooden houses of the city. I stayed a few more days, because the Sioux told me not to go too far for 48 hours so he could ask me some questions. The first day passed uneventfully, but the next morning I got a call from the Sioux, his tone as if he'd been crying. "Is that you?" "I'm the Sioux. What's wrong? Why are you crying? You were fine the day before yesterday." Truthfully, the moment I heard him call, I had a bad feeling. "I have no choice but to beg you. I know you can help me. You're the only one who can." His sobs grew louder. Without another word, I hastily packed up and rushed to the cafe he named. It was a local cafe. I'd been there days earlier, so I knew it. As soon as I entered, I saw the Sioux in a corner, clutching his coffee with both hands, eyes darting in fear. I hurried over, and when he saw me, he grabbed my hand like a life buoy. It hurt so much, I had to struggle to pry him off. "Relax, it's safe here. Tell me what's going on." He was agitated, sweat rolling from his nose tip. His face was pale. He looked unlike the man from days ago. "It's happening. Captain Lee was first. I'm next." He clutched his head and whispered, "After I left you, Captain Lee, my boss, and I planned to drive back to the bureau for a late bite after handling the case, then keep investigating." It was 3 in the morning. The hotel was 15 minutes from the bureau. Captain Lee was driving. We were all a little sleepy, but staying up is normal for CID, so we were certainly alert, though I'd rather have nodded off. He trembled, lifted the cup, and drank a big gulp. He seemed calmer, then continued. We were joking as we drove. About 10 minutes in, a tire suddenly blew for no reason. I remembered I'd changed the tires that morning. Nothing to do but get out to check. The road was empty, and it was chilly. As soon as I stepped out, I felt bone-deep cold. I found the rear tire punctured. Then I saw a nail over 7 centimeters long, clearly stuck in it, looking rusted. I finally pulled it out and prepared to change to the spare. Captain Lee asked what happened. I said a nail pierced the tire. He just owed and fell silent. While changing, I felt colder and colder. I thought it shouldn't be like this at this time of year. Plus, our uniforms are good quality. But I didn't dwell on it, finished fast, and got back in. When I got in, Captain Lee was gone. The key was still in the car, but he'd vanished like vapor. I called for him everywhere. No answer. I thought maybe he went to relieve himself, but after an hour he still didn't show. I got scared and called his mobile, but it was out of power. No choice. I drove back to the station and slept there. It should have been yesterday, so why didn't you meet me? I asked. Right. This morning Captain Lee returned to work as usual. I asked him, and he just said he had urgent business and left first. I was annoyed he abandoned me, but seeing he was fine, I relaxed. We continued investigating. The victim was young and pretty, but likely a prostitute. The me found she had an STD and had sex before death. But the most surprising thing was how she died. She was nailed to death. There were strangulation marks around the mouth, likely to keep her from screaming. Her hands and feet. The killer was very cruel, and the fatal blow was between the brows. That nail killed her. Then the body was flipped, face down, and laid on the floor. Isn't killing like this overly troublesome? Why go to such lengths to kill a prostitute? Even ripping up the floor, I couldn't help thinking, the more elaborate the murder, the bigger the holes. With all those locked rooms and alibis, there will be gaps. The hardest case is random street killing. Yeah, we wondered too, and all agreed the killer is a pervert, the Sioux said. Nothing unusual happened, but at noon something did. His voice shook again. I waited. I went to buy lunch. Just me and Captain Lee were on duty. As the junior, I do errands like buying food, cleaning. He is older. When I came back, I saw Captain Lee clutching his palm and screaming. I ran over. He was sweating from pain. I opened his hand, examined it from every angle, but saw no wound. He just cried that it felt like needle stabs. I know he's tough and wouldn't fuss over nothing, so I took him to the hospital. But tests showed nothing. I could only watch him scream. You mean the palm? Prickling like needles. It felt familiar, but I couldn't place it. Yes, that's what he said. Later, when the pain eased a bit, we discussed the case. Lee's son was there too, telling him not to overwork. That evening, I was called back and told Captain Lee was screaming again. This time, he fainted. Though we're superior and junior, we're like father and son. When I got to the hospital, this time his left leg hurt, same symptoms. No external injury, but a needling pain. Wait, do you recall the timing of the two attacks? I remembered something. First was noon, about 11:30. Second, near midnight. Yes, also 11:30. The Sioux thought, then confirmed. 11:30. I thought. The body was discovered at 11:32. I knew this. But some things get harder to recall the more you think. The Sioux saw me frown and thought I felt unwell. I can't watch Captain Lee be tortured to death. My father was murdered, and Captain Lee led the team that solved it for my father. Thanks to him, I passed and became Sid. I've always treated him as my own father, the young man said, crying. At first he choked, then he sobbed aloud. People in the cafe stared, making me very awkward. Just then, the Sioux's phone rang again. He was sobbing so hard he almost missed it. Only after I urged him did he answer. A few words changed his face. He grabbed my clothes and dragged me out. As we walked, he said, to the hospital. Captain Lee's condition has worsened. I checked the time. It was 11:30. I saw Captain Lee again. He was nearly unrecognizable. The day before yesterday, he'd looked handsome, tall, and strong. Now he lay on the bed like a pile of sticks, dark and thin. The right hand. I knew my scholarly background. A tall young man beside me, about the Sioux's age, looked at me with displeasure, then at the Sioux, as if to ask, "Who is this bird?" He said it flatly the moment we walked in. The Sioux went to see Captain Lee without introducing me. Then he realized and hurriedly pulled me over. This is Lee Zeng, Captain Lee's son, a few years older than me. He's a graduate student, sociology or folklore, I think. Then the Sioux introduced me to Lee Zeng. He completely ignored me, snorted, and walked off with a cigarette. He was handsome, but his attitude annoyed me. He seemed unconcerned about his ailing father, while the Sioux acted like the son. I was puzzled, but given their family issues, why overthink? I should first ask about his condition. Your right hand hurts again. I asked Captain Lee softly. It took him a long groan to squeeze out the sound. I called the Sioux out. Lee Zeng tagged along, smoking and glaring. If I'm not mistaken, Captain Lee is being crucifixion tortured, I said. The Sioux was shocked. Lee Zeng kept a straight face and snapped. Do you even know what crucifixion torture is? Don't spout nonsense, of course. Crucifixion originated in Rome. It was first a Presbyterian church punishment for traitors or deserters in war. It became famous through the Bible. Jesus was executed by crucifixion, but originally it wasn't a cross, it was a T or X. I took a drag. So what? What does this have to do with my father? Li Zhang mocked, provoking me. Some people you want to punch on first meeting, and he was one. I stayed patient. The key trait is the victim suffers extreme pain, and nails can pin down the soul. But if the crucified bore deep grudges, the body should be laid face down. Once inverted, the person will inflict double the pain they suffered in life onto someone else. Remember, not their own enemy, but someone else's, and each nail triggers every 12 hours. Captain Lee was just attacked at 11:30, right? I finished, and the Sioux looked confused. Ridiculous. Why punish my father instead of the real killer? Li Zhang shouted. I also hope it's the killer, I said calmly. He suddenly shouted at the Sioux, "Get this lunatic out." Then he rushed into the room. The Sioux looked embarrassed. I patted his shoulder and asked him to see me off. We talked at the hospital gate. Captain Lee's situation is bad. You said 5 nails were driven into the woman, right? 3 have triggered. We have less than 24 hours to find the true culprit. If not, the nail between her brows will kill him. I didn't want to scare the Sioux, but I had to state the gravity. He cried again, clutching my hand and begging, "What do I do? How can I solve this in under a day? Help me, or Captain Lee is doomed." He even knelt. I hastily helped him up, thinking there are still such sentimental people. I'm no Taoist and know no magic, but we must try. Things change if you don't give up. First, we examine the corpse. Can you manage that? I steadied the Sioux. A cop crying here is far from glorious. He straightened up at once. Whatever it takes, I'll force the me to let us see the body if I have to point a gun. He pulled me into the car and sped to the morgue. On the way, I was dazed. I'd only heard about crucifixion. There aren't even books on it. I didn't understand where the killer got the idea. Also, they say those crucified carry immense resentment. If we couldn't save Captain Lee, the Sioux and I might die too. While I thought, the car stopped and the Sioux dragged me in. After some haggling, we got in to see the body, but it was past 1 p.m. Time was short. We had to hurry. The woman was indeed very young and beautiful, without the vulgarity common to prostitutes. But the evil aura after death gave me chills, so I covered her head. I wondered since when hotel prostitutes had improved so much. No time to ramble. I examined the 5 wounds, each caused by a nail, with ligature marks on hands, feet, and neck. She seemed bound and nailed. I couldn't confirm whether the hotel was the primary scene, but per the Sioux, she had died not long before. No soil or anything brought from outside. She must have been killed in the hotel room. In such hotels, once the door is shut, no one cares what you do. You pay and stay as long as you like. The Sioux couldn't stand watching long, so I posted him at the door while I searched for more clues on the body. I had read the Sioux's notes. Based on time of death and the proprietor's call logs, the room hadn't had many guests. Only 2. One young man checked in that morning and left that night. Then another returned a few hours later, specifically requesting the same room. Unfortunately, the proprietor said they all wore masks and hats for fear of being recognized. As for the dead woman, the owner didn't know her, and nearby prostitutes hadn't seen her. The body had only 5 wounds. The me hadn't done the autopsy yet, but the preliminary report matched what I saw. Without leads, we could hardly find the real killer before 11:30 tomorrow. It seemed Captain Lee's torment was entirely the Sue's fault. At that time, the victim's face had been flipped down. Crucially, the Sue said her eyes were open when flipped. Captain Lee must have been the first she saw. I finally gave up and told the Sue to leave. It seemed the only way was to let the corpse speak. Just then the Sue stepped in, glanced at me, then suddenly pointed behind me, mouth gaping like a clay idol, unable to speak. I wondered what was wrong with him. He could only force out, "Be behind." I turned and saw the corpse spraying blood. I felt struck by lightning. My blood froze. Why do I keep getting dragged into this? But I had experience. I covered the Sue's mouth and signaled him to calm down. I moved slowly toward the door. If something happened, I could bolt. We watched blood jet like a fountain onto the floor and around. In minutes, the room reeked of blood. Finally, I couldn't stand it and shouted at her, "We're here to help you find the real killer. Please stop torturing Captain Lee." No response, so I repeated clumsily. It stopped at last. We finally stopped shaking. I looked at the blood on the floor, wondering if she hinted at something. Then it hit me, nails. Where are the nails? Where? I shouted to the dazed the Sue in the evidence room. What happened? He was almost afraid of me. Hurry. I dragged him off. As we left, the manager's horrified scream echoed behind. Anyone would scream seeing blood everywhere. I checked the time. Nearly 3. Luckily, the evidence room was also under Captain Lee. Hearing we were collecting for him, they let us look, but not take anything. I picked up the nails wrapped in plastic tape. They were still blood-stained after wiping, each about 7.5 centimeters, rounded head with threads underneath. Common nails. I examined all 5 and found nothing special. Did I misread the corpse's hint? Threads. Wait. I didn't recall the autopsy mentioning spiral wounds. These weren't the real nails that killed her. Where was the real nail? If the killer truly wanted to pin her soul, he would have used peachwood nails, which are not common. The Sue suddenly got a call. After a few words, he happily said they'd identified the female corpse as a local university student. I still stared at the nails, ignoring him, a student. I thought she was a prostitute. Captain Lee mentioned prostitutes. He said the young women gathering here are probably prostitutes. No wonder no one nearby knew her. But what was she doing there? Didn't the boss say he'd never seen her? By 4 we were at her university to ask about her. We soon learned her name was Q Juan, a senior in sociology. Her temper seemed prickly and she had many boyfriends. She'd been missing for days. She had a boyfriend and they had argued about whether she should stay after graduation. We found the boyfriend, an honest-looking man. I didn't think he could swing a hammer, let alone drive nails. The investigation yielded nothing, and we left disappointed. Before leaving, I did spot someone, Li Zhang. He hurried out of the library, clutching a book. Why wasn't he at the hospital with his father? I asked the Sue. He said Li Zhang studied hard. Really? I immediately returned to see what book he borrowed. The desk attendant refused at first, but seeing the Sue, she smiled and searched. Sealing Ghosts, a very old book, nearly falling apart when borrowed, the woman said softly. Why would he borrow that? I thanked her and rushed back to the hospital with the Sue. With nowhere else to check, we'd ask Captain Lee. When we arrived, it was 4, and the pain in his right heel flared again after 7 hours. Captain Lee looked better. Colleagues and leaders had just visited. Perhaps Lee had slipped out then. After comforting the Sioux, I went out to research the sealing of spirits. Hard to find, not because there was none, but because there was too much. But I finally found something about what to do after crucifixion and sealing. Exhausted from the day, we grabbed a few bites and prepared to return to the sealed hotel. Lee Zen came, looking coldly at us. The Sioux told him to watch Captain Lee and call if anything happened. Li Zing answered curtly, "He's my father, not yours." The Sioux flushed. I pulled him away. At 7:30 we reached the hotel. It was my first time directly entering the scene. Only a few of the Sioux's colleagues guarded it. The Sioux said I was a profiler sent from above, and I slipped through. The scene was messy, recalling the chaos then. A chalk body outline on the floor. I realized the floor was hollow, big enough to hold a person. The police had searched the room many times, so an amateur like me needn't rummage. I came only to feel what I'd do if I were the killer. I sat on the bed, closed my eyes, and tried to feel like the killer. The Sioux thought I was pondering and didn't disturb me, just watched. 2 people came that day without sacks or suitcases, so one was certainly the victim and the other the killer. They disguised themselves for fear of recognition. A student shouldn't worry like that, but the victim had an STD and a promiscuous lifestyle. Could the killer have simply flown into a rage over a price dispute during a sexual transaction? Such a complex method was astounding. An image flashed. The killer knew the deceased and came intending to kill her. He feared ghostly revenge, so he used legendary crucifixion to imprison her soul. But why crucifixion? I recalled from my research that crucifixion for a woman could be a punishment for lechery and adultery. At 8:17 we left. We found nothing. I reviewed what we had and decided to dig into her life. We returned to campus. The night was so lively I couldn't help thinking of my college days. Half an hour later, we finally found one of her few friends. She was the victim's roommate. Very pretty, but with a trendy, revealing style. I was surprised at how open girls are nowadays. Last time I saw her was a week ago. When she asked to borrow money, she said coolly while chewing gum, "Borrow money? For what?" The Sioux asked. She looked at him with contempt and said, "How would I know? Maybe an abortion or treatment. Not the first time. Her boyfriend doesn't care about her, but they won't break up, just drag on. Oh, she seemed involved with a grad student in social sciences lately. Why don't you ask him? Your name?" The Sioux pulled a notebook to take notes. Li Zing, Li as in Lee, truly upright. Very handsome. With that, a boy whistled to her and she ran off like the wind. We stood there. The Sioux especially stared blankly at me. What do we do? What else? Go to the hospital and find Li Zhang. 9:10, hospital. Captain Lee had fallen asleep. He looked exhausted but finally at rest. Maybe in 2 hours he'd be tortured again. The 3 of us stood in the corridor in silence. "If you don't want your father to suffer, tell us everything you know. You study folklore. You know how cruel crucifixion is. You won't wait for tomorrow to watch him die in pain, will you?" I spoke first, and Li Zheng sneered. "This has nothing to do with you from start to finish, does it? You're not a cop. Why meddle?" He mocked me. "He's my friend." "I asked him to help," the Sioux said firmly. "If you're still Captain Lee's son, Tell us everything so we can save him. He's my father. How could I bear watching him suffer? Li Zeng nearly jumped. Time is short. I'll be brief. What's your relationship with Q Juan? Why did you borrow Sealing Ghosts this afternoon? Also, where were you and what did you do at the time of the murder? The Sioux shot out the questions, then sighed. Li Zhang glared at the normally polite the Sioux for grilling him and almost convulsed with anger. What do you mean? You think I killed Q Juan? What book? How do you know? Were you following me? Though furious, he still told us he and Q Juan were just classmates. They met by chance in the library. He initially liked her, but after hearing of her behavior, he cut ties. As for the book, he wanted to learn about crucifixion to see if he could help. I didn't know whether to believe him, and the Sioux likely didn't either. We exchanged looks. After he finished, he saw our doubt and said he was at home when it happened and he and his father were watching TV then. We argued to no avail and parted glumly. The Sioux and I had no clues left. Our only option seemed to be the missing nail. Someone had swapped the evidence. They seemed nervous. The Sioux told me such threaded nails were common in their police cars. Few could access the evidence. The Sioux said the evidence that day was last transported by him and Captain Lee. It included coins and nails left in the body, and a nearby hammer. The hammer had no prints and could be bought anywhere, so basically useless. You said Captain Lee vanished after you got off the car. Yes, you don't suspect him. I was with him the whole time, the Sioux replied quickly. But as you see, the evidence nails aren't from the corpse. I needn't tell you how strictly evidence is guarded. You know better than me. The only one who could swap them is Captain Lee. Would he dare? He didn't kill the woman, so why resort to crucifixion? The Sioux was unhappy. He looked through the window at the sleeping Captain Lee. Lee had just entered, reading beside him. Don't you find it suspicious? First he warned you not to fixate on the body, maybe to avoid implicating you. Then your tire suddenly blew, and later the evidence was swapped. I'm not saying Captain Lee did it, but he could be helping someone. For him, he would even obstruct justice. The Sioux pointed at Li Zhang inside. I nodded. Now we just had to prove Li Zhang killed Q Juan. Nails used to crucify should be of peachwood, or once pulled, the dead will seek revenge. I guessed Captain Lee swapped the peachwood nail when they got out and tossed it somewhere. If so, the peachwood nail must hold evidence proving Lee is the killer. Ah, a shriek came from the ward. Captain Lee clutched his right leg in agony, his features twisted. How could this be the same Sid captain who once cowed criminals? The Sioux and I rushed in and helped Li Zhang restrain him. The clock read 11:30. This one was worse. Captain Lee was nearly insane. This nail was stronger than the last. Only 12 hours left. Even without the brown nail, he would soon die. I glanced at Li Zhang. His face was blank. No, he seemed secretly pleased. I grew annoyed. Doctors came to sedate him. I grabbed the Sioux's clothes and dragged him out. Let's go to where you parked that night. We must find the peachwood nail even if we don't sleep. Call more people. Just us two is too little. It's wide open, and we don't know where he threw it, the Sioux said. No, the reason won't hold, and Captain Lee's evidence theft shouldn't be public. We go first. To narrow the area, I have a way. I gritted my teeth. We'd have to use that method. At 1:20 a.m. we reached the morgue. While the Sioux argued with the manager, I slipped in and found Qiujuan's corpse. I pulled her out, pressed my right index finger to the wound between her brows, and applied rice wash water I'd prepared to her eyes. I said to myself, if you want redress and wish to spare the innocent, help me and lend me your last trace of soul. I bit my index finger and let blood drip into her wound, then wrapped my finger. Success or failure was fate. Now all her memories and visions rested in that peachwood nail. My finger, carrying her last soul trace, could resonate with the nail. By touching it, I could see what happened, but it was dangerous. If the nail wasn't there, in just 12 hours I would be the one pierced between the brows. I finished and rushed out with the Sioux, telling him to drive fast to the parking spot. It was only 2:30. I raised my right hand like a radar, searching everywhere for the nail-bearing Qiujuan's last soul. Even as my finger throbbed with exhaustion, I found nothing. The futile search lasted till 6:30 a.m., 5 hours left. The Sioux slumped, exhausted. I began to regret my impulsiveness. I had trusted my own logic too much. It seemed I would pay. Maybe my head had problems. I decided to drive back to the hospital to talk. As we got out, the hospital had just started selling breakfast. It was about 7:15. Seeing my life ebbing, I felt calm. On the way, I bumped into someone. He didn't even look and walked on. My index finger suddenly stabbed with pain. I sensed something. Could the nail be on him? I told the Sioux to stop him. He was a boy of 17 or 18, dressed in Korean fashion. He looked scared of us. The Sioux searched him and indeed found the peachwood nail in his pocket. We sternly asked where he got it. He stammered that he'd picked it up days ago and kept it as a novelty. I didn't think he was lying, and the place he named was where we'd searched all night. He stood there dumbly. I pretended to scold him, telling him to apologize if he ever bumped someone again. Then I let him go. He ran off in fright. Getting the nail was like an injection of adrenaline. Now I only needed to drive it back into Qiujuan's brow to see her death. At 8:40 a.m. we slipped in and the Sioux kept watch. I slowly inserted the nail and dripped my blood again. Then I closed my eyes. I was excited to finally know the killer. I found myself in a strange setting, surprisingly not the hotel room. Then I saw a figure from behind, then something like test results. The figure spun and lunged at me. Images flashed non-stop. A pair of hands squeezed my throat, nearly choking me. Finally, the vision faded. I jerked back, like shocked. Though it was a moment, I clearly saw the man's face. Now evidence collection remained. At 9:30, the Sioux and I gathered everyone at the hospital, including Li Zhang, the girl, and Qiujuan's boyfriend, and took their blood. The Sioux used this as pretext to solve the case. A while later, I returned with results. I looked at them, took a deep breath, and held out several test sheets, one each. What does this mean? Li Zhang, from a scholarly family, asked. These are health reports. Among you, only one is different. He has an STD, the same type as the deceased Qiujuan. I shook the report. Their faces were blank. I thought, stubborn denial. No more delay. We needed to prove the killer. Crucifixion punishes the unclean and the traitor. This Qiujuan surely behaved badly, even selling her body. We all assumed the inn was the primary crime scene. Indeed, the blood spurted from nails in flesh. the nearby hammer, and, crucially, the Mez report and her missing date all seemed to fit. But actually, Qiujuan was strangled. She was nailed off to death. I looked at Li Zeng and smiled. Isn't that so? He kept his cold face, not answering. I don't know what trick the killer used to delay the Mez estimate by 2 or 3 days. But when nailing, the killer left his own blood. It's on the nail between the brows, the peachwood nail. I produced the dark red nail. There seems to be characters carved on it, the girl cried. Yes, I can read them aloud. They mean the people and the common folk, righteousness forever. In fact, this is the origin of your name, Li Zeng. In other words, this peachwood nail is yours. I held it to Li Zeng. He looked at it and couldn't help laughing. You think you can prove I'm the killer by a nail? Ridiculous. I don't actually want to say you're the killer, because the killer is him. I turned and pointed at Qiujuan's boyfriend, whom I'd thought weak. Sure enough, he was the man I had seen in her final memory. It wasn't me. Don't wrong a good man, he protested loudly, sweat beading. I don't need to wrong you. Under the nail is Qiujuan's blood, and yours too. I raised his hand. On his thumb was a fresh wound, small but new. No need to deny. I know about you and Qiujuan. You both came from poor families, but grew up together. Qiujuan did what she did to help you study abroad. But as you neared graduation and had your documents ready, you planned to dump her. That day she came to your room, deliberately asked to spend the night, then pulled out an STD test result to mock you. With such a disease, your physical would fail. You strangled her in anger, perhaps fearing her ghost or out of guilt. You sought someone who could use occult methods to spare you from law and spirit. I finished and looked at Li Zeng. That man knew this. I don't know what he used, but in the end you performed the crucifixion in the hotel room. He gave you the crucial peachwood nail. The boy dropped to his knees as if soulless, muttering, I'm sorry, Juan. I checked the time. It was 11. It seemed over. Full, Li Zeng's face changed. Both angry and impatient, he suddenly calmed and looked at me. I seem to have underestimated you. I noticed you when you came to town. That idiot called to say he killed Qiujuan. I forgot to say they've always considered me a friend. You know, pretending to be stupid to socialize with them is painful. You showed up, so of course I drew you into my revenge. I knew you could disrupt my deployment, but a game without variables is pointless. Yes, I taught him crucifixion. Qiujuan actually died 2 days before your inferred time. When he found me, the body had decayed a bit. I poured wax oil all over her to suppress the stench. Don't you wonder why she was strangled but had no neck scars? And why blood spurted even though she was nailed post-mortem? All thanks to my invention. Li Zeng took out a small box and produced a translucent half-span worm like a silkworm. These are corpse parasitic worms. Once they enter a human a corpse under 3 days old, they start dividing endlessly. How big can they get? Let me tell you, they are smaller than viruses. Inside the corpse, they keep devouring dead cells and reassembling, restoring blood circulation. All forensic conclusions assume blood stops circulating after death, leading to necrosis. Naturally, you were fooled. Next, these insects control all muscles, bones, and nerves. I can make the corpse perform any movement, even speak. Fun, isn't it? Li Zeng smiled, playing with the bugs. The first person the proprietress saw that day was the idiot. The second was the corpse I controlled. I called the police after the nailing because I knew you were involved. How could you ignore something so strange? But I don't understand your talk of revenge. We haven't met, have we? I checked the clock. Jam 11:20 menit. Hayampiha. Wait for that old man in there to wake and ask him about his crime 20 years ago. Though I couldn't kill him this time, I still made him suffer. I deliberately left the peachwood nail, hoping you'd use it to find me so we could play. Pitied the old man spoiled it. Still, variety makes the game fun. He laughed. Seeing someone who scorned life chilled me. I'm going, but I'll be back for you. Fighting you is fun. He turned and ran to the balcony. We rushed to stop him. It was the 11th floor. Li Zhang fell like a kite with a cut string. It was horrific. We took care of it and returned to the ward. It was 11:30 and Captain Li had woken. The curse seemed lifted. As we rejoiced, a scream rang outside. I ran out to see Qiu Zhuan's boyfriend writhing in agony. I helped him up, and at my touch, a sharp force surged from his body. What came next I won't forget. His whole body bristled like a hedgehog, countless spikes piercing out. Blood, bone, and flesh splattered the walls and floor. The girl fainted on the spot. The Sioux stared at me. How is this possible? It's the backlash of crucifixion. The perpetrator suffers 100-fold, 1,000-fold revenge. I sighed. Maybe if he had talked more with Qiu Zhuan and not let the knot in his heart turn into a demon, this wouldn't have happened. The Sioux then handled the aftermath. I still had questions and waited for Captain Li to recover. Days later, the Sioux and I picked Captain Li up. Li Zhang is not my biological son. His first sentence stunned us, especially the Sioux. I figured he'd know sooner or later. 20 years ago I solved a murder. It was pure chance. I was a junior cop like the Sioux now. I happened to witness the killer in the act. He used nails, and I shot him dead while resisting. My first shot. Later I learned he crucified his wife out of suspicion of adultery. They had a young child. I couldn't bear an orphan, so I adopted him. He was named Li Zheng because he saw the phrase for the people of the whole nation. Righteousness forever on his father's relics. 7 peachwood nails in all. Seeing the fate between us was one reason I adopted him. Though I knew he'd learn, I killed his father. I didn't expect he'd set such a trap to avenge himself on me. That time I deliberately nailed the tire and secretly swapped the evidence. He begged me. He said in a rage he killed the girl and begged me to save him. So I agreed to swap the nail. No wonder Qiu Zhuan found you. In fact, there was no blood of that boy under the nail. Only yours, I said. Mine, Captain Li asked in surprise. Yes, I only set a trap to make the boy admit the blood under the nail was actually yours. Later, after checking everyone involved, I learned it. It's no surprise crucifixion was chosen for you. It seems Li Zheng intended to kill you by crucifixion. I thought Captain Li would be angry, but he looked calm and much older. I don't blame him, it's fate. Though I'm a cop, I did kill his father with my own hands. The Sioux and I fell silent. The Sioux's phone rang. After he answered, his face changed. I asked what happened. The autopsy shows the corpse wasn't Li Zhang's. We don't know where he got it. He's been dead for days, the Sioux said. So he didn't simply commit suicide. He must have used corpse control insects. He knew the truth would come out and arranged an escape. Thinking of his parting words chilled me. Seeing my friend pensive, I said, "Maybe he just wanted to scare you. Don't worry." But from what you said, Li Zeng is more adept at that stuff than you. Indeed, perhaps he's hiding somewhere now, setting traps for me. If you hadn't bumped into that K-pop crazy boy then, and couldn't find the peachwood nail, what would you have done? I asked, half joking. He spread his hands helplessly. That would have been it. Then he smirked and said, "Luck is part of ability." Ha! We all laughed.